about undocumented workers, okay? And I'm gonna look at this question. Now, when I was in my leftist, radical kind of, not radical, but just my leftist mode of thinking, I wrote 3 research papers on this very question, and my answer was clearly no, and undocumented immigration was good, and and there were all sorts of positive things that I could just discover about undocumented immigration. So I'm going to talk about a couple of those because I think they're still true, but I'm also going to talk about the other side. So I'm going to give you a couple of perspectives. So do they take jobs from unskilled workers and depress labor costs? The answers to both those questions are yes and no. And what's really important is it's yes and no. And you got to remember that. The answer to most questions that involve anything political or anything sociological are yes and no. You see things from multiple perspectives, and that's really, really important. And I'm saying that to you in a very humbly because it's honestly, I look back 30 years ago, it's some of the things I used to think and things I used to say, and I'm embarrassed that, oh God, I was just so blinded by my own ignorance, right? So let's look at a couple things. We only mostly know, we can go into a lot of studies. People have done a lot of studies on this, okay? So let's go back actually first. So let's take jobs from unskilled workers. Let's take that one first. I'm going to look at both these. I'm just going to look at them kind of together. Yes, absolutely, not a question, of course. And no, absolutely, not a question, of course not. Okay? We can find studies where people really go out and look at census data and look at, oh my gosh, jobs reports and look at it from so many different interesting angles. But we can also just go with anecdotal data. And the anecdotal data says not a question that undocumented workers are taking jobs, but they're also taking jobs that other people don't want. Okay? So let me show you a couple of things that are pretty clear. So in the fall of 2011, Alabama passed this really, really super strict immigration law. And employers can't hire workers without documentation in the state. Like you can't. That's just not possible. Law enforcement officials have to ask for identity papers from anyone who looks foreign. They passed this law. Now the police agencies across Alabama were saying, "Are you all out of your minds? We're not doing this. Like, wait, we're going to be stopping people on the roads? Anybody who looks like they might be foreign, which would be you and you and you and you, and like, oh my God, we're going to stop." They just said, "You people are nuts. That'll cost so much money for us to do that. And children can't attend schools without citizenship documentation." Now, many undocumented people don't send their children to school anyway, but many schools don't ask. It's like a don't ask, don't tell thing, and so it's like, okay. Many people don't send their kids to school because their kids are out working in the fields, so many undocumented people, they come up for a short period of time, they bring the kids are working, everybody's working, then you go back home, or whatever the case. I mean, there are lots and lots of different experiences, right? So Alabama passes this law. Next slide. It's a disaster by almost every account, and they repealed it 2 years later, right? 120,000, they had 120,000 poultry workers in 2010. 120,000 poultry workers, y'all. You know what poultry, does anyone live near a poultry processing plant? Anyone ever work in there? Anyone ever been in one? So imagine you're processing chickens, and imagine the millions of chickens that are just coming through. First off, the inhumane ways in which chickens are being treated because they're just seen as objects, but I'll talk about that at another time. But just the blood and the smell and the feathers and the yuck and the guts and the everything, and just seeing death and death and death and carnage. 120,000 poultry workers getting paid very, very little. 60,000 workers flee from the state immediately as soon as they pass this law. Before it got repealed, the state lost $10 billion. This is in a study from this Economic Institute at University of Alabama. Why did they lose the money? Because the undocumented people are coming and doing the jobs. And they're doing the jobs that they can't get other people to fill. So the jobs are now open, so you say, well, okay, so all you Alabamans who are unemployed, like come in and take the jobs. It's not happening. The anecdotal evidence is very, very clear. If it would have worked, they would not have repealed it. They repeal it because it's just like when you say, so when Trump says we're going to kick all the illegal or undocumented workers out, y'all, no, we're not. No, we're not. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. We can kick some out. I don't know what some is, 5%, 6%, 10, 20, etc., but all no, we are not. And I just say that thoughtfully. It can't possibly happen. The anecdotal evidence that shows us across the board in every state that's tried is just a disaster, and they stop. So go to the next slide. Georgia immigration crackdown, same things. 40% of the workers left the workforce. Now, they didn't do the police piece here in Georgia. 40% of the workers left the workforce. In the first year, there were $140 million in crop losses. So the question, what's really interesting, and this is what you have to think about, right? You think about power, like who's in power and who's making these decisions. How is it that in Alabama and in Georgia, the politicians can make a decision that all of the farmers and big growers and everybody were saying, dudes, this is going to be a disaster for us. Please do not do this. They passed the law anyway. It's a disaster for the growers and the owners of the poultry processing plants and the hog processing plants and one after another that's employing the undocumented peoples. And it's a disaster because I'm going to show you a couple videos here. They can't get other workers in to do the work. It's just clear. So when you hear that argument by people saying Americans don't want these jobs, at a level, it's not true entirely. It's not true entirely. But the evidence in the places where we've done it is like, yeah, it doesn't appear as though most Americans really want the jobs. Okay? It's not true entirely. There are many jobs that immigrants are taking that Americans would love to have, and I'm going to talk about some of those, even in some of these jobs. But mostly it's not. So at a fundamental level, I have to ask the question, how is it that those politicians passed a law, even when these very powerful people, the growers and the owners of these industries and plants and so on, said, don't do this, and they did it anyway? Who are they listening to? So this is like Trump. You understand, there are so many business people and manufacturing people and farmers and agribusiness, billion-dollar industries that are saying, stop this immigration nonsense that you're pushing forward. It makes no sense. Please stop. There are very thoughtful people whose interest it is to have the immigrants coming into the United States, and they're saying, please don't do this. And yet, there's this wave to do it anyway. And so the question becomes, how is it that it's happening anyway? Why does it happen? Why is Trump moving forward with this when so many powerful people are saying don't do it? I don't have an answer to that question. It's a very intriguing, interesting question. So what happened in these places? Okay? Why did the governor sign the bill? The governors. I don't know. It's not simple. This is what I mean. It's complex. So here, go to I love this. This is very funny. Thanks, Jesus, for this food. De nada. De nada means, for those who don't speak Spanish, it's like, no problem. It's nothing. Right? It's cool. Got it. So I want to show you these two videos. Now, mind you, look, I can show you lots of videos, lots of different ones that will grind an axe to show one thing or another. So there's not a question that there are some growers and there are some manufacturers and so on and so forth that for whom this was a positive thing. And for other ones, it was a negative thing. Most people, it was negative because that's why they repealed it so quickly. But watch these two videos here. It's very, I think, informative. Because, hang on, the farmers who are The second one, and then we're going to talk about the economics here.
They think the work is so hard until they just turn around and they up and quit.
On the farm fields of Alabama, the verdict is in. The state's tough immigration law just isn't working out.
They're putting Alabamans back to work. In my area, experience I've had, they ain't too good at what they do.
Keith Smith says most immigration workers left after the law took effect. So this potato farmer hired Americans. Problem is, he says, most show up late, work slower, and are ready to head home after lunch. Some even quit after just one day out in the field.
There's a Hispanic man that works for us, and I say, you know, he's 52, and he'll make anywhere from $70 to $100 a day. I said, if you can keep up with him and do a good job, you can make that. But they're not physically in shape to do it, and, you know, probably not mentally tough enough to do it, some of them.
Over on this tomato farm, the story's not much different. Brent Smith may be the only exception.
The bending over, and if you're not used to working and kneeling down and bending over and constantly up and down all day long, is the grueling part of it. It really is. I mean, other than that, it's not any harder than anything else you do.
With a 9.9 unemployment rate, Alabama is almost 1% higher than the national average. Tomato farmers say skilled workers can make anywhere from $200 to $300 a day, but unskilled workers make much less.
And so what's the pro and the con here? Now, not too long ago, I heard Donald Trump say something that was actually really empathic and talking about the exploitation of undocumented workers. So let me go to the next slide. Let me show you a couple of things. Well, actually, go back. What they alluded to in both videos are low wages. It's like, well, okay, so pay people more money, and then you can get Americans to do the jobs. Makes sense, right? So the one guy said, the only white guy, it was really interesting, he's the only guy working in the whole field. He's a white guy. It's like, that's it. It's clear. We got an issue, so pay people more money. So here's what happens when you pay people more money. The price of your tomatoes go up. The price of your avocados, the price of everything starts to go up. And now everybody across the U.S. is paying more money. And you don't want to pay more money. Nobody wants to pay more. So everybody wants to pay less. It doesn't really impact us. If none of us in this room are doing farm labor, then we can just say, okay, well, good. Just let undocumented people come in. Pay them less. And then the price of my tomatoes or green peppers or cucumbers or melons or whatever it is will stay low. And that's good. I go to the grocery store. I pick the things out I want. They're not expensive. Life is good for me. But it means that somebody else at some level is exploited. So Trump was referring to that. It's like, well, we're just exploiting workers by continuing to bring undocumented workers in and pay them less. So how is that fair? How is that a good thing? Like, what's that about? So you're not paying people a fair wage. You're paying them an unfair wage, terrible working conditions. Like, how is that acceptable? So you see the problem here. But do you want to pay twice as much for your tomatoes? Who wants to do, anybody in here want to pay twice as much? You want to pay 3 times as much for a watermelon? Whatever it is, I don't know what it's going to be. It's like people don't want to do that. So then we go here, go to the next slide. 1947 to 2007 alone. See, here's average hourly wage, average hourly compensation, and productivity. Look at productivity go up, but not wages. This is in the United States. So now you go at the lowest level, what we're seeing is this big gap. The wages of unskilled laborers are remaining flat. You bring more and more immigrants in to positions, especially undocumented, they can compete with the laborers that are here. An immigrant, so you get some of these guys from Mexico who are coming, like, for example, so I used to, when I lived in Ecuador, in rural Ecuador, I would go in communities, and there were like, in some of the communities where I worked, there were no men. Between the ages of, say, like 18 and 65, every single one of them had left to go to the United States. Nothing but women and old people and children, okay? There was nothing in Ecuador, y'all, like nothing in these communities. There was no way for them to make a living in any way, shape, or form. So they would take this really treacherous trek to the United States. To be able to make $5,000 or $8,000 or $10,000, or if they really got lucky, $20,000 or $30,000, and then send it back home or bring it back home and then build a house, maybe buy a car and then be kind of set. People who have very little, willing to do whatever they need to do. It's like, how many of you right now, if things got really bad and you need to like survive and pay your bills, would go out and pick tomatoes in the hot sun? Because you just could. I mean, really. So now we get this problem here. The more immigrants we have, the more we can play workers off of one another, the more the big bosses, the big farmers, the agro-producers, the manufacturers, people owning the chicken plants, whatever, the more they can pay people less. And if people demand more, if they try to unionize or want a fair wage, then we can just say, no, we're not doing that. We're just going to go bring some immigrant workers in or undocumented workers in who are definitely willing to work less, because no matter what, their lives are much worse than you, and they are definitely going to do whatever they need to do to survive. And then what's that mean for you? Like, okay, well, then you have to accept less. They get more money, you get less money. You see the conundrum here. So in that sense, well, immigration isn't fair to anybody, any workers at all. It's not a good idea. What you need is no immigration and keep the wages up. But it's competition. Are you a capitalist? You support the free market? Then immigration is all part of the free market. Then just do something else, whatever you got to do. So you're torn. It's a really, really difficult conundrum. What's the difference in compensation?
Like, because the graph showed like hourly compensation.
For that grade, that's just all wages and productivity. I just use that just to show we got this amazing productivity, and then you just have wages that are really stagnant. And if we look at the wages for working class and poor, like at the lower end of the pay scale, they actually go down in the past 20 years, right? So people are earning less. And the more immigrants we can bring in to undermine that, then the less they earn. And so, this is it's not a problem for me. No immigrant is going to come in and take my job. Penn State's not going to hire somebody for half of what they pay me, and they're going to think that's not the issue for me. But it may well be true for the person who cleans this room at night. It may well be true for the person who's working in some manufacturing plant making the carpeting for this room, or making the doorknobs, or making whatever it is. It may well be true for them. It's not for me. And so then that becomes a problem. And yet at the same time, it's like, how do you say no to people? Like in this community where I lived in Ecuador, it's like, how do you say no to them? It's like, man, if you traveled with me to some of the places where I travel, and you met some of the people I met, and they said, yeah, I'm going to go sneak into the United States illegally and work. Any of you who have a heart, even, and which is pretty much everybody in here, if they say, yeah, and I'm going to end up probably taking your job, most of us would be like, go ahead, man, because your life, like, holy God. Oh, jeez, yeah, go ahead, take my job, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's a complex issue. It's complex. So it's like, I don't know. So Yes, there are many Americans who would take many of these jobs, but you'd have to pay them more money. And your price of chicken. How much is chicken a pound now? You go to Wise or Giant or whatever, double the price of that. You want to pay double for your chicken? Y'all on State Patty Stage, you have some cookouts of chicken. If someone said, man, you didn't get much chicken. Like, well, did you see the price of that chicken? I only got 2 packages. Well, you were supposed to get 10. I know, but I can only afford 2 packages. It's like, is that the world you want to live in? No, it's not. And so therefore, these undocumented immigrants are rocking your world. You see what I mean? Like, it's complex. Is it good? Is it bad? It just depends on how you look at it. Okay. You have a question? Does anyone have a question? Did I miss anything? I'm trying to be... Dude, hang on. Dude. I'm trying... I can't cover all of the issues because there are many, many, many issues. Hang on one sec, bro. But...
So when you were saying like certain people, like the price of chicken going up for if we're paying these people more, do you always have to like either raise somebody else down or make their cost of living go up to bring somebody else up?
No, you don't, because the owners could actually take less profit, especially with chicken. What we're talking about are massive agro-processing plants,
But then that's
owned
like
by
bringing
huge
those
corporations.
owners down. But that's what I mean. That's bringing those owners down.
Yeah, bring them down, but you're going to have to bring them down a little bit. And they're not owners; they're like stock. These are massive agro industries.
So how do you reconcile that with like somebody who's like a diehard capitalist that would make the argument like I worked for my money, blah 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 blah.
Dude, good luck. This is the problem with capitalism, right? Like, this is the problem with capitalism. I mean, how much can capitalists manipulate the situation so they can make more and more and more and more money? This is where socialism comes in. It just sort of says, it's not socialism. Don't think about that with a capital S. It's just small s. But it just sort of says, look, I don't care what happens, you just can't make that much money. We have to redistribute because there are problems when so much of the wealth goes into the hands of a smaller and smaller groups of people, and so many people don't have what they have, don't have enough to even get on. And those people at the bottom got a lot of guns. It's like, yo, watch out, man, because that's how revolution starts. You know what I mean? So the owners, and you're going to read an article about this, I think it's in the next section. It's like, that's how revolution starts. It's like owners, capitalists, big dogs, rich people, you need to distribute some of that money. But who's going to say that? Bernie Sanders said it. Listen to Bernie Sanders. He's made some really, really good points. He's very thoughtful, and he's saying, look, y'all, right? You Trump people, what you really want is me, Bernie Sanders, because I'm really responding to what your needs are, what your issues are. But like, people don't listen to him because they see him as a socialist. So that would be my response. Does that make sense, bro?
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm not saying we had to redistribute the wealth. I mean, I'm saying this is the problem. Y'all right? Like, how much money can the rich have, the big corporations? They buy up more and more and more chicken processing plants. Eventually, they own them all. And like, how much profit can they possibly make before someone finally says, there's no more money down below for people to even survive? And then you bring somebody like Donald Trump into power. And listen, Trump people, look, you bring this guy into power thinking like he represents the people at the bottom, like so many poor white people in particular, working class white people, thinking he's got the answer. Dude, he doesn't. It's the same answer. It's the same answer. It's like more money into the hands of the rich. It's not it. And at some point in time, where are you going to go? Where are we going to go for our workers next? Because they're working for less and less and less. Bangladesh? Well, in Bangladesh, God, people are like, oh my God. The suffering is so immense, they'll come here and work for even less than the Mexicans and Salvadorans. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have an answer to I don't know. You can't do that. Like, fuck, I don't know. And it's a good thing. The economy in the United States has boomed, y'all. boomed in the past 30 years. Holy smokes, the economy has just blown the lid off. You're here. Most of you are here. Your parents, most of you who are middle class or upper middle class, your parents have all the money they do. And if they've invested it in stocks and the market and so on, the reason they have all that stuff is because our economy has blown the fucking doors off. And it's done that largely because we just get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper labor with the same or with more productivity. So it's like work for you. At some point in time, it won't work anymore, though. That's part of the problem. Or maybe it's not. Maybe it will keep working. I don't know. Like, shit, I have no idea. All right. Okay, let's do one more.